Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed right here on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this afternoon, we have Ben Jones, Product Development Specialist with Nasdaq Index Research, to discuss Nasdaq 100 indicators, fundamentals, and technicals. Ben, let's get right into your first chart with the Nasdaq 100 relative to the US index of leading indicators, because it's pretty glaring when you look at the performance.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And so for today's, NDX Trade Talks, I want to provide a general survey of the overall strength of the Nasdaq 100. And we need to start with this chart in front of you. And this is an update to a chart that we talked about. I think it was maybe like early June, basically looking at the Nasdaq 100 and the overlay of the 10 leading economic indicators chart. This chart is used to basically kind of show, at least lately, kind of the disconnect between the Nasdaq 100 and the fundamentals, or the economy, so to speak. This chart was inspired by the work of Henry McVeigh at KKR, so definitely want to get a shout out to him when he wrote a research piece kind of showing the disconnect initially between the S&P 500 and this indicator, but it applies to the Nasdaq 100, where for a while, coming out of that market bottom in March of 2020, we started to see the Nasdaq 100 rise pretty quickly. However, as we all know, the economic uncertainty that we were all faced with, the leading indicators were just falling quickly. Remember, this is an indicator comprised of important metrics, like unemployment claims and interest rates and weekly manufacturing hours. So it really provides a good indication of kind of the general direction or health of the economy, so to speak. So I think we have some good news here after a crazy week with tropical storms and power outages and earnings. We did see that the leading economic indicator chart did tick positive with the conclusion of July, right? So we are beginning to see the market and this leading indicator index move in tandem and move in the same direction, which is really the first time that we've seen that really in a while.
All right, Ben, moving along to the next chart here. I want to take a look at the fundamentals. It's been an interesting earnings season for sure. It's second quarter earnings. We have the work from home, the shutdowns incorporated into that. And actually, the beat rate is higher than the historical average. So what are you taking a look at there?
Yeah, we're beginning to see, kind of in the maybe that we've exited the heart of earnings season, right? Which is, I think, captivates a lot of investors and those that track the markets. And last week we looked at the big tech giants, right? The Amazons of the world, the Facebooks, the Apples, those names that make up a good portion of the Nasdaq 100, and how they were able to beat earnings and are continuing to see earnings growth. This week we saw about 22 names in the Nasdaq 100 release earnings this week, for the most part fairly positive. What we're seeing is, with this work from home movement, the Nasdaq 100 is, typifies innovation, typifies growth, typifies kind of the modern day economy, right? Heavy on the healthcare names, heavy on the consumer service, heavy on technology. But what I think is important is taking a step back and just understanding where we came from and kind of where we are today and potentially where we're going, right? So in this chart, it shows you the earnings per share growth going back in time a few years. You can see how we came off of that peak at the end of 2018. We started to see kind of earnings per share growth decline, but nothing too negative. But what's important though is that at the bottom of this health crisis, economic crisis, however you want to describe it, we are seeing some signs of light, so to speak, as we're beginning to see the earnings growth beginning to tick positive and slope higher for really the first time during this whole crisis. So I think it's a good thing, right? We're beginning to see how companies are beginning to maybe increase in profitability, right? And so I think if you're looking for stocks that are profitable and are seeing earnings rise, it's a good universe to examine. So again, we're beginning to see earnings per share growth increase within this universe, and it's showing signs of light, which I think is important going forward.
All right, and let's wrap up with the technicals here, because of course the question is, Ben, the significant outperformance that the Nasdaq-100 has shown relative to the other major benchmarks. It's glaring. So, what are the technicals telling you? Is it time is it going to take a step back a bit here? Can we see, more room to the upside, some consolidation?
For sure, yeah. So, this puts a nice bow on this little, Nasdaq 100, package, right? We looked at the, kind of the economy, right? The leading economic indicators. We looked, briefly at the fundamentals, kind of looking at, EPS growth. But what about the technicals, right? So I definitely want to give a shout out to Nasdaq Dorsey Wright, a Nasdaq company that provides, technical research for financial advisors and investors around the world. And, they track some really neat charts that can give you perspective of really any corner of the market. And of course, we're covering the Nasdaq 100 today. So, these two charts present you with the story of, how strong is the Nasdaq 100, as a stock company universe from just an absolute trend standpoint, right? Are we seeing kind of trends rise and stay positive? So what you see in this chart on the left-hand side is a percent positive trend indicator for the Nasdaq 100. So this is looking at all the companies that are in the Nasdaq 100 and basically, tracking the percent that are trading in a positive trend. And what's key here is that, roughly over 90%, 92% in fact, of the Nasdaq 100 companies or stocks rather are in a positive trend, right? And typically, healthy markets, healthy environments with fairly low volatility, we typically see, this type of indicator above 50%. Well, we're well above that right now. And you really go back to about 2013 since we've been at this level. You can see this indicator stay up at this level for a while. So even though we see, over 90% of these stocks in a positive trend, that's a sign of just absolute strength, right? In order to be in a positive trend, you need to what? Continue to kind of rise in price. If we, shorten the time horizon a little bit and look at just, the percent of stocks in the Nasdaq 100 that are trading above their 30-week moving average. This is what the indicator on the right-hand side, shows, right? The 30 NDX. And right now we see about 84% of the Nasdaq 100, trading above their 30-week moving average. This is down a little bit from what we saw, after that really sharp rally in June, as well as, that rally back in January. So, while we are seeing the market move to new highs, you're seeing valuations, move higher. We're still, in some cases, really looking at some of the technicals trading below, some of those highs. But, that's just really getting into the details. The key is that there's a lot of momentum in this universe of stocks. We've talked about the relative momentum before, the relative strength. These charts just show you the absolute strength within this particular index.
All right, Ben, great stuff as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.